Hello and welcome to another episode of Another Look. I'm Dylan Nicholls, news director at the River 95.3 Sports Radio 1450.
And I'm Janet Michael, host of the Valley Today on the River 95.3 and Sports Radio 1450.
I always stutter step on that because I want to say station at the end of it.
You want to say stations.
But you've told me not to say station before.
Yeah,
you said we don't do that.
It's implied.
I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm a stickler for grammar, Janet, and I like to complete my things. Anyways, this is our show. Basically, where it started as a podcast, and it's still a podcast
yes.
On our website, theriver953.com. But this is our basically news and review show, but it's local news from across the Shenandoah Valley. We take all the news stories that have been happening in Clark, Frederick, Warren, Shenandoah counties, Page County, all these different areas, and we basically just review the biggest stories that have been happening over the course of this week. Some of them are developing stories that we've been tracking with over the course of the podcast. And we just hash it out. I mostly give the facts. Janet mostly opines. Some might say a little too fiercely at times.
People love that. This is why they tune in. They want to know what Janet thinks about XYZ nonsense that's actually happening in the news.
No, it's true. It's true. Honestly, I want to know what you think, because some of the times I look at these stories and I think to myself, she's got to have an opinion on this one.
I have an opinion on everything. It may not always be bad either. I've surprised you a few times in having good opinions. Yeah,
you have. You've actually completely surprised me, which seems like your politics have done a complete switcheroo, and you're suddenly in support of things I would never have thought you were in support of.
I know, because I'm independent.
You're a true independent.
I am.
A true independent.
I'm an independent thinker.
Well, Janet, I'm excited about this week. You know why?
We had a lot of news.
It was the week of bureaucracy. Oh, so much stuff happened in the bureaucratic system. So much stuff that was just waiting there. That was just being bounced from council meeting to council meeting, being forwarded around, and it finally got done. And some of it seems good, some of it seems bad, some of it is mixed opinions going around here. It's been kind of a crazy week in terms of local government. So I'm excited. I'm excited. One of the things I want to talk about, I've got three main things I want to hit for my things.
Well, then you just go right ahead. Go first, Mr. News Director.
Oh, well, thank you, Janet. Basically, I want to talk about the Winchester approving the demolition of these historic structures.
I have an opinion on that.
I knew you would. This was after the Board of Architectural Review voted to protect 5 historic structures at the corner of East Piccadilly and North Kent Streets that the Winchester EDA wanted to basically develop that corner. The BAR voted to protect 5 historic buildings there, and now Winchester City Council has basically ignored that advice. So that's pretty interesting.
Yes.
And then big news, in my opinion, the biggest story of the week, the new replacement for the Robert E. Aylor Middle School could receive $7.5 million more in funding, which has been a big deal because the County Board of Supervisors and the School Board for Frederick County, they've both been going back and forth. They've both been talking about, we need this much. No, I think you just need that much. So there's a lot going on there, a lot to talk about there.
And I'd just like to point out that when we covered this story initially, I said they're going to end up getting all the money they wanted anyway. So I don't know why they're making a big deal out of this. So once again, Janet was right.
I almost want to find that audio and insert it somewhere.
Oh, we are totally going to do that.
Yeah.
Well, you are totally going to do that because this is your show, not mine.
No, I know. I have to do all the editing on this thing. But pain. But I might just do that for you because it's I'm amazed at your prediction. You've done very well. You're like a real Karl Rove over here. Oh man. And another thing that has displeased a lot of people, but that Winchester really wanted to do, is approve the conditional use permit for this new Chantel cell tower that's going to be located inside Jim Barnett Park next to the Lester P. Sinhas BMX track.
Yep, which I believe I also said they were doing a whole lot of hollering and a carrying on, and they were going to put the tower there anyway.
You probably did. I'm not sure I'm going to search through that many audio archives to find it, but I'm sure you did.
I'm going to get a scorecard for the studio.
Hey, that's not bad.
Yeah.
We really should keep track of this sort of thing. Maybe.
Well, and I think it's funny that you picked the cell tower story because one of the stories I picked was the mayor having to apologize to city employees for the grilling they got from council on that particular topic. Because I always love a good story where somebody yells at somebody and then they get out of line and somebody else has to come and apologize. Because usually I'm the one yelling at somebody and being out of line, and then Liz or Andrew has to go in and apologize and say, "I'm sorry, she was off her meds."
You like to see someone else wearing those shoes.
Yes.
Yeah, that was one counselor in particular, and the circumstances around that whole thing are still pretty unclear because basically the city attorney can't really comment on it at this time. So I don't know what's going on there. But talking about that,
I'll give you my perspective because that's what really matters.
Well, and this is the thing for these Winchester stories. Janet kind of has the inside perspective.
I am a
sometimes.
Winchesterian.
Yeah.
Winchesterite, a
Winchestonian.
But then I want to go a little more statewide. I want to talk about VDOT canceling this I-81 Exit 307 study, millions of dollars down the drain.
Yeah. That's. I mean, it's a lot. It's a big deal. People are pretty excited when it comes to VDOT funding and VDOT changes, especially where it concerns I-81 because of all the traffic there.
I see you looking upside down at my two dumb criminal stories. I haven't decided yet. I have two. I'm trying to decide which of the two I'm going to use. So stop cheating and looking to the third segment, which you have to, listen to the first couple to get to the really fun part of the dumb news at the end.
Yeah, if you're listening to this on air, this is what we do on the podcast all the time. Our last segment, the first two segments we do, it's Janet and I sharing the stories we thought were most interesting from the Shenandoah Valley. Our last segment is basically where we just take a look at clumsy criminals from across the United States, across the world sometimes. I think I had a Britain guy that faked his own kidnapping at one point.
That was last week. That was pretty funny. My husband chuckled at that when it was on the air last week.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. I got a Tim chuckle.
I smacked him and told him to quit chuckling that he had to chuckle at my stories, not your stories.
No, I'll take that win. I'll take that win. So, we're excited for that. I've got a really good dumb story this time around. Okay. I'm really excited for it.
I have people who are now sending me dumb stories from having listened to the podcast. I'm getting text messages. I'm getting emails saying, "Hey, how ridiculous is this? You should use it in your podcast next week."
Janet, I got to say, I'm really disappointed. You're kind of gotten lazy about this whole clumsy crooks thing.
It's working smarter, not harder.
Me, I like to toil. That's my MO. But so we got a lot to talk about this episode of Another Look. So if you're listening on air, this is our second on-air episode, so keep listening. We're going to be doing this now. Last week we did it on Tuesday. No, it aired Tuesday this week because we recorded it last Friday.
Yes.
It was too complicated. We're doing it all on different days.
We got calendar whiplash.
Yeah, so what we're doing now is the podcast is always up on Fridays. Everyone's come to expect that now, all our screaming, raving fans. So, and the same is going to be true of when we put it on air, but the podcast will be up first. So if you want to listen to the podcast on your way home before we air it, it's going to air at 7, but it's going to be up whenever we're done recording this.
Yep.
Which hopefully is not too long. And
it is 1:50 on Friday, the 14th of September, which is unheard of because we are usually not even in the studio until like 4:30 on Fridays.
It's insane. So as we speak, Hurricane Florence is bearing down on North Carolina, and we are recording an episode of Another Look for your pleasure that we're going to air at 7. So, look forward to the podcast being up. And, of course, if you're listening right now at 7, keep doing that every single week. We're going to come back, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the bureaucracy. We're going to talk about all these bureaucratic developments, most of them going on in Winchester, when we come back with some more Another Look.
It's an award-winning lunch hour every day at noon with the News at Noon and Valley Today. Listen live on air, online, or on demand at theriver953.com. That's theriver953.com.
And welcome back to our next segment of Another Look. This is our show where we review news from across the Shenandoah Valley. I'm Dylan Nicholls, news director.
I'm Janet Michael, host of the Valley Today.
And we were just telling you what the show's all about, and now we're getting into our first segment of news. We're very excited, Janet. I mean, we
printed almost all of the same stories. We were on the same news page this week.
Oh, we're amped here at Another Look, folks. We're
amped is a bit strong. I only have a half a cup of coffee left.
Oh, we're mildly excited here on Another Look.
And I have to refill my coffee during the next break and grab another Apple House donut. Thank you, Katie.
I love those donuts. Oh, no. Are we doing free advertising already? All right.
She'll give me more donuts.
Oh, there you go. Everything has its price.
Yes.
No, but we're talking about a lot of basically bureaucratic progress. Local government is actually getting some things done, getting some controversial things done, and making some decisions that not everybody's happy about. The first thing I want to talk about is this new development that's going to be put on the corner of North Kent Street and East Piccadilly by the Winchester EDA, but it was blocked on July 19th because the Board of Architectural Review for Winchester said basically there are 5 historic buildings there that you cannot take down because these buildings, the oldest building there was built in 1850, and it belonged to Confederate soldier James W. Barr. I don't know who that is. I mean, it seems like a big deal because it's a Confederate soldier. I could not tell you who that is for the life of me.
And I zoned out for a minute at 1850 because there's a new coffee out called 1850, and all of a sudden I was picturing their commercial in my head.
Oh, okay, Janet. Focus up.
I'm bringing it back around.
Focus up. So essentially what happened was they wanted to protect those 5 properties. They voted to basically preserve the 5 properties. The matter went before the Winchester City Council. The Winchester City Council held 5 separate votes, one for each property that the Board of Architectural Review decided to protect. And at the end of the day, they voted to protect none of them and have allowed the EDA and its developer, Piccadilly Street Investments, to basically move forward. So now Piccadilly Street Investments is saying that their goal at this point is to build the new structure, which is going to include retail stores, dozens of residential units. I want to say it was 45 to 48 residential units is the number. It's going to be multiple stories. They're thinking they're going to have it ready for occupancy by 2020. Janet, what do you think about all this? Because I seem to remember the last time that we talked about this, you said you were in favor of this thing and that you didn't see the reason for preserving these properties. You didn't get it. You thought they were in bad condition already. Am I summing it up?
I mean, for the most part, it was one of those things. It's not like these were already that I know of, and I could be totally wrong and just not be dialed into the backstory for this. But it didn't seem to me like these properties were already designated historic, that they were trying to save, that they were going to do something with, or at least actively preserving. They were literally falling down buildings that were an eyesore and probably dangerous to a certain degree, that when it suddenly came time to knock them down, people were like, oh, no, wait, but they're historic. And, I'm not opposed to saving historic buildings. I think we have to do a certain amount of that. Otherwise, your history does disappear. But that doesn't mean you have to save every single one.
Well, now, I seem to remember from a previous story that we talked about somebody from and I don't remember the exact name of the organization, but a historical preservation society who was at the public hearing on this.
Preservation of Historic Winchester.
Preservation of Historic Winchester.
The PHW, as it were.
The PHW.
You got to be from here to know that.
Oh, okay. And someone from there said, why don't they just refurbish or renovate or do something to incorporate these historic buildings with the new complex? Or at least, you would think at least the 1851, even if it's falling down because it was made in 1850. Do you think that the city could have mandated, if you want this complex, you have to basically refurbish this 1850 thing and make it part of the complex? Do you think that it would have still been financially viable for Piccadilly Street Investments and the EDA if they had done that?
I don't know. I think at this point, how
salvageable did these buildings look? Because you know this area, right?
Yeah, and they, as just a random person who drives by them, they didn't look, I would say that you can, and this isn't, so my ideas of how you can preserve and reuse things are, I'm sure, different than actual historians, because I am not an actual I know, it's shocking.
Janet.
But salvage the bricks. Salvage some pieces of the interior, the fireplace mantles. Do what these people do that go into these old architectural homes and save things and incorporate those into the design of this new structure that's going up. It's going to save you money. It's going to make warm, fuzzy goodwill to the community, and you're still getting what you want and trying to at least show some respect for the history of the building.
Well, yeah, and I have no doubt that they actually will do that.
I'm going to trademark that idea. So if it happens, those people owe me money. I'm just saying.
No, I think that's standard bearer. I think that's sort of the procedure.
Yeah.
When you actually just destroy and demolish a historic building, is you look inside first and make sure that any valuable beams or any valuable parts or whatever, that you take those out. I don't know that they would incorporate that into the new development. I don't know what the rules are on the books of that. Maybe they give it somewhere else, or there's an auction, or who knows what.
But I will tell you that if they got permission, if city council said yes, go ahead and demolish these buildings, at the end of that meeting, somebody should have been out there with a sledgehammer, because I am telling you right now, this is not the end of this. There's going to be an appeal. There's going to be a court hearing. This is not the end of this. So they would have been best to go running out of that city council meeting with sledgehammers and jackhammers and start knocking those buildings down, because somebody's going to get a stay, and this is not the end of this story.
This is what we were talking about when we were talking earlier about Janet's opinions. There's real politic, and then there's Janet politic. And Janet politic is bring out the jackhammers and sledgehammers and destroy it as fast as possible.
Yeah, if you got approval now, you better run with it, because I'm telling you, this is not the end of it.
Well, Janet, let's talk about this really big news about Robert E. Aylor Middle School.
Yes.
This is pretty interesting. You predicted this, you're saying.
I did.
Yeah, because basically what's happened was finally, after much squabbling between the Frederick County Board of Supervisors and the Frederick County School Board, funding was approved for Robert E. Aylor Middle School. They only approved, though, $45.5 million towards the construction of a replacement school for Robert E. Aylor, which, in case you do not know, is infamous for being a dilapidated school.
It's a health hazard.
Most expensive school to maintain, a health hazard. CO2 levels are so elevated that some parents are complaining that their children are coming home with headaches, and the children have actually missed school as a result. They have CO2 monitors in that school that actually light up and alert them somehow every time the levels go up, and do it frequently over the course of classes. So it's been a frightening thing. It's been, frankly, in a lot of parents' minds, and I don't blame them, an unacceptable thing, and they need a replacement. But the school board was unsatisfied with $45.5 million, because they said that would only build a 140,000 square foot facility, and that they need at least 160,000 square feet to be able to accommodate 900 students, which is the capacity they want to reach.
Yep.
And they say otherwise, we're going to just have to add renovations, and we're going to just have to spend more money.
They were going to get the extra money one way or another, whether it was in the initial funding to build the school the size it needed, or 5-10 years down the road, if maybe even not that long, having to add, going back to putting these little trailers and all of that other stuff that they have to do.
Well, and so this is the point that Supervisor Shannon Trout made when she made a motion to schedule a public hearing on whether or not more money should be allocated, more money specifically meaning an extra $7.5 million to actually make this 160,000 square foot school and make school board members feel confident that it can house 900 students.
Yeah.
The vote just to have the public hearing was 4-3. So I don't know what that tells us, because, and mind you, it's just a public hearing. This funding's not guaranteed at all. All this means is that the public is going to be able to get together. It's going to take place at September 26th at the County Administration Building at 7 p.m. So if you're interested and you've got a dog in this fight, be there, because that's how democracy works. You can voice your opinion on this thing. And basically, I don't know what 4-3 means. I don't know if that is a good indication that, 4 people were for the public hearing. Maybe they'll be for the funding as well, and enough people are knocking down their doors. I do know that people were really up in arms about this, that people have been contacting people about this, and citizens are very concerned. And all I can say is hold on to your hats on September 26th, because I have a feeling there's going to be a huge amount of people coming out to comment on this, because there's nobody more motivated as both a voter and as a citizen to talk about the issues than a parent.
Yeah.
Right?
And I have multiple concerns. I mean, you saw me just now circling the 4-3, and then in the notes I wrote, look up who, because I live in Frederick County. I am in Middletown. So I want to see whether or not my supervisor voted that he wanted this public hearing to move forward, because I'm of the opinion that there's no such thing as a bad public hearing.
Right.
If this is going to involve at some point tax dollars, my tax dollars, which I've said in a previous episode, I have no problem. I never have ever had a problem with paying more in taxes that I knew was going into a school system that was going to educate our children. My kid's out of the school system. He's already graduated college. He is now living even in another state. But I know that these kids in the school system right now are going to be our future. I want them to be safe, and I want them to be educated in a proper manner in a decent building. I got no problem paying 25 extra cents or, whatever this is. I'm concerned that not all the supervisors wanted a public hearing. That just sets off a red flag for me. Who didn't want the public to have input on this?
Well, and that's the thing, too, because like you just said, you're looking up your supervisor regarding this public hearing, and I'm guessing regarding the vote when it finally happens on the issue. And I think maybe that's the issue, because the opponents to this thing are saying the county is already $126 million in debt. We cannot afford to add on an extra thing if we could make do of $45.5 million. They're also saying that the school board changed its estimate early on from $45.5 million, suddenly saying, oh, we need $7 million more. So, and for that reason, they are skeptical, or were at least skeptical earlier on, that the school board actually needed that money or needed to even do a replacement and couldn't just do repairs to the original school. That was an earlier debate. But basically, if they voted against it, I think it's because this seems like an issue that could make or break a supervisor, because people are taking personal notice over whether or not their supervisor is voting yea or nay to bring a good school to their children. But the supervisor may also be concerned, who voted against this, that look, I have to be fiscally responsible, and I cannot justify this on my conscience with $126 million in debt hanging over our heads. So there might be a real crisis of conscience.
It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out, because, part of it is, as a resident in this school district, I want to know, where did that $126 million in debt come from? Because if that didn't have anything to do with me, that's not my problem. You dug that hole. You figure out how to dig out of it without having our children have to pay the price for that. The other part of it is, as somebody who did raise children in this area for as long as I can remember, every single time a school was built, it was built already to capacity. And it was always just frustrating for me personally to realize, okay, this great new school opened and now it's already full. Why weren't they building these schools to be a little bit larger? They get the same census details. They get the same population information. Why can't you build a school that kids can grow into? And this, to me, just seems like they're going back to that old mantra of, we're just going to build the school to fit the kids we have now, forgetting about how many kids they're going to be coming in the future. But
it shouldn't be a stopgap.
But I have $12 in a bank account at any given time, so $126 million means nothing to me.
But that is an interesting first point that you made. That point about the debt. That's your own hole. You dig yourself out of that. But it's interesting, because this is the issue that people really care about, because it's so visual and because it affects them so directly, this school thing. But maybe as voters, we should all be a little more personally responsible for the budget. Maybe we should all try to be budget hawks ourselves and actually come to public hearings that don't seem to directly affect us, because at the end of the day, if they spend that money, little by little it builds up. If you felt it was unnecessary then, but you didn't say anything, or you didn't care enough to pay attention.
That is on me, because some of this money could go for roads, it could be for infrastructure, it could be other things that I also care about. And then you can come back next week and say, hey Janet, I got the budget breakdown, and as it turns out, then I'm like, oh crap, so that 126 is part of my problem. So sorry, supervisors, but the chances of that happening are highly unlikely.
Even at the promise of proving you wrong at something, I would not do that much research on this thing. But I cannot wait to see how this turns out on the 26th. Real quick, I just want to touch on this because we're about out of time for this segment, but I think we can open the next segment with this one.
Okay.
Because this leads into your story. The Winchester cell tower, the Chantel cell tower that's supposed to go up in Jim Barnett Park. This has been very controversial. Somebody actually resigned over this cell tower, which it seems now is going to definitely be built in Jim Barnett Park right next to the Lester Payne St. Haas BMX track. So if you want, let's open the next segment with this.
Works.
Talk about that, and then we can go straight from that into the town council argument, snafu, grilling, I called it in my headline, that happened afterwards as a result of this. There seemed to be some interesting politics going on. So we're going to have that for you when we come back with some more Another Look.
It's an award-winning lunch hour every day at noon with the News at Noon and Valley Today. Listen live on air, online, or on demand at theriver953.com. That's theriver953.com.
And we're back with another segment of Another Look. I'm Dylan Nichols, your host, the news director here at the River 95.3 Sports Radio 1450. And she's Janet Michael, the co-host. You might call her the sidecar to the motorcycle that is this show. You might call her the second fiddle.
Yeah, and I'm okay with all of that because I know that the reality of it is that my show, The Valley Today, is an award-winning show, and therefore, you know how guys that wear
Oh, look at that. Her mic went down. Look at that. Her mic died. Isn't that weird? Must be some malfunction. So, Janet, how are you? Oh, your mic's better again.
Yeah, funny how that works.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's get serious, Janet.
Okay.
Come on. There's serious news in the Shenandoah Valley.
Yeah.
In this
Let's
news
talk
and
about my
review
cell
program.
signal because, life or death depends on whether or not I have a signal on my cell phone traveling through Winchester.
Well, then you're going to be very happy, Janet, because I don't know if you know this or not, but apparently Winchester has approved the conditional use permit for Chantel Telecommunications Company.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, based in Edinburgh, to actually erect a cell tower in Jim Barnett Park, right next to the Lester P. Sinhouse BMX track. Couple things with this. First of all, it was a 6-3 vote that happened Tuesday, and it came with a stipulation that they add a bank of lights to this cell tower for the Lester P. Sinhouse BMX track, so it can actually benefit the track. The other thing is even though they have approved the permit or forwarded the permit, they are still haggling over the franchise agreement because they've called the offer, which is basically they were to lease this land that they're going to put the cell tower on for 20 years. Chantel is saying it would pay $622,800 to the town, or that's what the town would net with this agreement. Councilor Evan Clark basically said that this was lowballing.
Oh.
Are we allowed to say that on the air? Because I didn't include it in my report because I didn't know what we're allowed to say. But
because that's an actual thing. Yeah.
Okay,
we're not going to get into what it could mean. Otherwise, we can't say that on the air.
I'm just saying I didn't know in different contexts.
Yeah.
It could
So
be.
they lowballed the number. That's acceptable.
It's
well, the act of that isn't acceptable, but the phrase is acceptable. Okay, good on.
All right. Moving on. Counselor Milt McInturf, though, is saying that that's actually he's got an experienced source who emailed him and said that money was on par with money paid for tower leases back in the 1990s. I don't know if that is counting inflation or what exactly he meant by that, but the council basically voted 8-1 to table the franchise matter, but the conditional use permit has gone through.
Wow.
So there you go. And the franchise proposal they'll talk about at the next work session, which is September 25th. First of all, because you've got a story that connects to this very directly, but Janet, first of all, what do you think about...
I told you they were going to put the cell tower there. If you recall in a previous episode.
Yeah.
Again, I said they're going to put it there anyway. Because didn't they have people resign? Like, didn't, what's his name?
No, it was John Bentley.
Yeah.
So John Bentley, he's the Parks and Rec Advisory Board chairman, or was the Parks and Rec Advisory Board chairman. He resigned because the Parks and Rec Board recommended that they not allow the cell tower to be erected in Jim Barnett Park. They thought it would be too much of an eyesore. But their recommendation was ignored, and John Bentley said something along the lines of, I'm not sure what use I can be in this position. I'm not sure what this board is for if its recommendations are rejected by city council. And you said you agreed with that.
Yeah, as much as it pained me.
Well,
I did.
leave that.
I agree. Yeah, we'll leave the other portion of that in the podcast. You'll have to go and listen to. But the premise of his statement, yes, because I mean, if you're not going to take into consideration some of, and I understand you can't do it with all of them, because as I'm about to say, you should take into consideration what these boards and commissions do recommend. That's why you've created them. And if you're not going to, then why have them? But I'm thinking back to the story we talked about at the top of the hour with the demolition of the historic buildings.
That's
Thinking, wait, it's kind of the same thing, only I agreed with them that time.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly what I was thinking of, too, because we were talking earlier about the demolition of historic buildings in Winchester, so there can be a new development on the corner of Northeast East Piccadilly and North Kent Street.
Yep. So, I mean, he does. He has a point, and again, I think when we talked about this, when it had been in the news a couple of weeks ago on a previous podcast, if they were going to put this cell tower in the middle of the park, near the family playland or near the duck pond or then, there might be a little bit more cause for concern. But it's going on the outer edge of the park that basically overlooks 81 anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and you've got a point there. Personally, I think they should have put it over the duck pond. And just taken all the steel beams and basically made a cage around the ducks. But that's just my opinion. It's
you've
unpopular.
clearly never seen those ducks. They need a cage. There are days when those ducks are mad and nasty, and if you drive by in your car and don't just throw bread out and keep going, they will hunt you down.
What are you saying? Ducks?
I'm telling you, these ducks are mad, crazy ducks.
Oh, is it the city ducks?
Yeah.
Is that the?
Of course, my husband is probably listening to this right now, going, "They're not ducks. They're geese. They're geese. They're not ducks." And
well, Janet, of course, that's a whole different thing. Ducks are nothing to be worried about. They can't even bite you. Their little beaks are so flat they don't even hurt. But the geese, that's a whole other thing. you can get screwed up by some geese.
Okay. You know what? We're gonna table the discussion of the cell tower permit and talk about, so that I don't yell at you.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about somebody else yelling at somebody and the mayor of Winchester having to apologize for them.
It's very interesting because this whole thing stemmed from this accusation from Councilor Milt McInturth.
McInturth.
I keep doing that. McInturth. I keep doing that. I'm sorry. And what he accused City Manager Eden Freeman and I believe it's
Winchester Parks and Rec Department Director Lynn Miller. Accused them both of basically negotiating the Shentel franchise agreement without involving the city attorney or without the city attorney's knowledge. And they're denying any wrongdoing, saying we did not negotiate the franchise agreement. And he's saying that he's got emails to the contrary, or that he had a conversation rather with the city attorney where the city attorney said he was involved, but they had contact with Shentel beforehand. And that's all in an earlier report than the one that you're holding there. Well, and there's got to be a certain amount of that anyway. I mean, you don't just suddenly have this tower decide to pop up and put it in this location without somebody saying, hey, we might want to put a tower there, and somebody saying, oh, where do you want to put it? We're thinking about here. Well, how much are you willing to pay? There's got to be some base information gathered before you can even get to a point where you're going to negotiate, or either of these two people can take it to city council. So,
well, it sounds like the protocol is to basically at that base level have the city attorney involved before the approach. I'm not exactly sure about that, but all I can say is it sounded like it got a little heated, according to accounts of him actually asking Eden Freeman and Lynn Miller about what happened and whether or not they had negotiated before involving the city attorney. He didn't raise his voice at all, but he interrupted Miller at one point, I believe, and it seemed sort of like a hostile questioning.
Yeah. I think he had a little bit of snark in his tone.
A little bit of snark in his tone?
That's an official news term. I'll let you use that in the future.
Snark in his tone?
Snark in his tone.
Yeah, this just in.
Yeah.
Snark.
Yeah.
On the rise.
Yeah, much like I have in my voice when you are talking about ducks and geese. But anyway.
Well, Janet, get your animals
but
right.
Then the mayor had to come and say, now, kids, settle down.
Well, and like a good mayor does every once in a while.
Yeah.
Keeps everyone happy and together. And but it was kind of interesting because the mayor made his statement, and then Milt McInturth said something along the lines of, you don't have to apologize for me. And apparently the
Council President Bill Wiley
cut him off.
Yeah.
And said,
somebody needs to apologize, and you clearly weren't going to do it. So sit down and be quiet. We'll finish this.
We were just talking about this in the break because we know that they film these things. And
I am almost sure that they videotape city council meetings, because I know they videotape Front Royal Town Council meeting and Warren County Board of Supervisors meetings. This day and age, you can't not do it. But I can't remember whether they're on YouTube. I probably get them on one of those crazy channels at my house, but it's football season. I'm sorry. It's football season. And the Ravens were horrible last night, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, are you?
That's a whole other show, actually.
Are you a Ravens fan?
Yeah.
Actually?
Well, I was up until about halftime last night, but
you're all upset. Well,
but yeah, I mean, it's kind of these kinds of stories always kind of tickle me, because you think we forget that these people that sit on city council and that run for public office are still people. They're still regular human beings who are going to lose their temper. They're going to lose their cool. They're going to say something they probably shouldn't have. And it's just kind of funny to see that, sometimes this high school, middle school stuff plays out on a stage like city council.
Yeah, I think the point that the mayor was making was that whether or not McIntyre was right in his accusation or whether or not it was accurate, there's a way to address these kind of things, especially in
I want to have
council
Mayor
chambers.
Smith on my show.
Do you really?
Yeah, I like the way City Hall and these chambers are a place of civility and respect. This was not afforded to you in the last meeting. I like this guy.
You like,
I like
the sound
way
of that?
he thinks and the way he, constructs his sentences. I need to call Mayor Smith and say, hey, do you want to come do a Valley Today and introduce yourself to my listeners? So if you're listening, Mayor Smith, invitation's open.
Our nation could use some good sentence
As long as he doesn't want me to go do those workouts. He does these workouts where he runs and he does these little workouts with the mayor. I don't want to be doing any of that physical stuff.
How do you know his workout routine? Oh, this was a public thing.
Yeah,
right?
it's a public thing. I don't want any parts of that.
It was like a Get Healthy campaign. You don't want any part of Get Healthy?
No, I don't.
You'd rather just sit here on the back porch?
Drinking my coffee, sipping the bourbon, and eating my chocolate. That's all I'm looking for.
Well, I'll go running with the mayor. So
you go running with the mayor.
You shoot me an email, sir, and we'll set it up.
Yeah. And running is what you may need to do because you're not going to be able to drive on our highways.
Janet, do tell.
That segue.
That was a great segue.
Yeah, it's because I'm the professional here.
You know what made an even better segue? That you didn't use it. That you just immediately stopped and said, what a great segue, instead of smoothly using the segue. I love it because everyone I've ever met in radio at this point has always stopped in the middle of a good segue and said, how about that segue on air? It's so funny to me.
It's like, hey, wait, my horn's hanging here. Let me just toot it for a second. Yeah.
All right, so tell us about this VDOT.
So, well, actually, I want you to tell me about it. VDOT cancels I-81 Exit 307 study. So the first sentence in this story that you write is, after spending $900,000 on the project, VDOT has decided to cancel a study evaluating the interchange at Exit 307 of 81. $900,000.
Now,
that's a zero away from another comma, right?
What?
Well, another $100,000 and it's $1 million and there's another comma, right?
Well, yeah, but technically anything that's $100,000, you could say the same thing about $100,000. That's a zero away from another comma. So but not to question your math skills or anything.
Yeah, don't do that.
But here's what I will say about that. Because on the face of it, it seems like they should have known early on and planned better in terms of, we think that this will be viable or we think this will not be viable. We think this will be worth our while overall, so we should get started on this, or we don't think it will be worth our while. But having said that, and also having attended a little bit of business school, I'm familiar with the concept of sunk cost. And it does not make sense because you spend $900,000 if you think something is not worth the effort and nothing is actually going to come to fruition out of it, to spend another $400,000 out of desperation to try and make it happen.
Yeah.
So I understand that's money already gone, and I understand that, but it's incredibly disappointing for a lot of people because we're looking at this thing, and after $900,000, there's not a shred of paper for it because they could not publish a report that's incomplete, and the report is by definition incomplete because they did not basically
have a finding.
Yeah, and basically the reason that they canceled this whole thing was because they didn't plan it out enough and didn't realize that it would actually cost more money than they thought, and their budget cap was $1.3 million. So rather than spend another $400,000 knowing that they would actually have to go over that budget and spend even more money after that, they said, nope, that's our budget cap. So if we're not going to be able to go beyond that and complete the report anyways at this point because we can't expand that budget cap, then we might as well cut things off now and just completely drain the project. So logically, at this point, it makes sense as a move, but from a planning perspective, from a knowing your budget before you get involved perspective, that's disappointing, especially because a lot of people are hungry for some I-81 improvements because that road is scary.
I know. And I'm trying to think right now, exit 307. So I know I'm exit 302 in Middletown. I think the mall is exit 310 because those of us who have lived here, that's how we judge our exits, by what is located when you get off of them.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So is 307, that's not Kernstown. That's not where they just put a ton of money rerouting 37 and extending 37. Is it Stevens City?
No, I got to say, because I actually live east of here, so I really don't know. I'm hardly up in Winchester area anyways. I'm based more in Fauquier County, so I couldn't tell you.
But I am not a fan of 81. I think we've talked about this in previous podcasts that 81 is I take Route 11, I go 50, I go 340. I pretty much do whatever I can to avoid 81 because that's where all the crazies go.
Well, see, I'm a JMU alum.
Yes, Stephen City.
Yeah, so I'm on 81. I was on 81 all the time. So I'm just used to it. I don't really notice how bad it is at this point because I was going up and down it. But it's bad. It really is. So we want all the efforts that we can to make it better, but it's just a shame when something like this happens, when poor planning basically wastes a ton of taxpayer dollars.
Because, that's that could have gone to Robert E. Aylor.
It very well
it couldn't have, because I know that there are different little silos that all of this money goes in, and the silo for the roads can't necessarily go into the silo for the schools. You got to keep all of that stuff separate.
Is there some loophole where Robert E. Aylor can apply for smart scale funding from VDOT?
Wouldn't that be cool? Doug Stanley's going to be my guest on Monday. I'm going to ask him how that's smart scale stuff actually works.
That'll be the next crisis for Robert E. Aylor. With the new school, the roof is actually the top of an interstate, and cars are just rumbling across.
Going over across the top.
Yeah, and then we have to worry about emissions, alarming amounts of emissions in the school.
Well, that's all I have for local news. So can we cut this short so we can get to our stupid criminals? Can you believe this is happening elsewhere in the world? Or, our working title initially, Meanwhile in, because mine is Meanwhile in Minnesota.
For nobody who knows what we're going to do next, that was the most confusing garble of words. But what we do next is we've been calling it Dumb News. We're going to change the name. And actually, we're going to change the name in the break. We're going to come up with a new name right when we come back.
We're going to ask you to send us a text.
All right.
We're going to ask you to listen to, because it just suddenly occurred to me that was the other feedback we got last time, is that we didn't ask people to interact with us very often or as much for the on-air version. So 635-4121, listen to the next segment. Get a sense of what it is that we do in the last segment, and then you text us your ideas.
Yeah, we're done.
For what we should call it.
Yeah, because we're in the last segment of every show. We're done with local news. We're done talking about issues that affect the Shenandoah Valley. We're relaxing. We're letting our hair down. In my case, not much of a change. And we are talking about dumb criminals from across the United States and sometimes the world. So get ready for that because it's a lot of fun and we have a lot of laughs. So we're going to do that when we come back with some more Another Look.
It's an award-winning lunch hour every day at noon with the News at Noon and Valley Today. Listen live on air, online, or on demand at theriver953.com. That's theriver953.com.
And we're back with some more Another Look. This is normally our show where we go over news from across the Shenandoah Valley, but we always end it with some dumb news from across the world and across the nation. I'm Dylan Nicholls, your news director here at the River 953 Sports Radio 1450, and she is
Janet Michael, host of the Valley Today.
Janet, what dumb story do you have today? Because you've got this grin on your face. Your face is, you're split ear to ear here.
Okay, so here's the up and the down. So we usually do this as a podcast. We've got 17 or so episodes on our website at theriver953.com. Because we normally do them as a podcast first, we have a little more leeway and say, I don't know, the language that we can use. I can be a little more free sometimes with my opinions. Not necessarily about issues, but sometimes even about people.
yeah, a little more free.
But because we're airing this on the air for the next couple of weeks to try and drive traffic to the podcast, I can't use what I wanted to use for this headline. So I'm going to read you the actual headline.
Okay.
Burglary suspect nabbed after getaway vehicle gets stuck in large manure pile.
I think I know what your alternate title was.
Well, and then when you were laughing about the grin on my face, I had a whole other thing that I could have said.
It's almost
However,
too good.
We're on the air, therefore we have got to clean it up a little, so to speak, which ties in with my story.
Janet, tell me about this pile of manure.
So, meanwhile, in Minnesota.
Of course.
Minnesota.
The manure capital of the world.
You're going to get in trouble for that.
I am. No, it's
Matthew
a wonderful place.
Bloomquist, 29, was nabbed on a burglary charge after he got stuck in a manure pile during the getaway, investigators said. A bungling burglar in Minnesota was nabbed after his pickup got stuck in a large pile of foul-smelling manure during the getaway. He was found standing on the side of the road, smoking a cigarette, covered in manure from his waist to his feet. When deputies arrived to investigate Wednesday morning, he was wearing jean shorts over long underwear and no shoes, which the deputies assumed were somewhere in the manure pile.
Oh, no.
Something doesn't smell right, the detective said.
How did he fall? They just couldn't resist. I'm telling you, I say this every single time. The guys that write these little news articles are poets.
I'm telling you.
Poets.
Obviously, this encounter was accompanied by a strong-smelling odor, the detective said. Add to that the fair amount of rain we received over the weekend, and you have a nice blend.
A nice blend.
Deputies said Bloomquist was caught snatching lumber and other items from a farm shed in Main Prairie Township. When the farm owner called to report the overnight burglary, he said surprisingly that the pickup involved was still on the property, stuck in the manure. Deputies said the truck carrying stolen lumber got stuck in a large manure pile during the getaway. The owner said he saw two men, but one managed to run off. Bloomquist and the other man apparently spent hours trying to free the pickup without success. When questioned, Bloomquist told deputies that his friend bought the lumber and that he was just helping him. Gudmundsson, who was the deputy, said a deputy hosed him off before taking him to jail.
Well, that was sweet of him.
Where he was booked on burglary and possession of stolen property charges. His rap sheet actually included a 2012 burglary conviction and 2 arrests for possession of burglary tools. The trip to the jail was made with the windows open, the deputy said, adding that the deputy's patrol vehicle still reeked 3 days later.
Wow. That is...
It would have been a much funnier story on the podcast.
It would have.
I could have totally let loose for this.
It would have been. But I really enjoyed that, Janet.
Yeah.
That was great.
And again, somebody sent that to me and said, hey, this would be a great one, probably thinking, oh, Janet's going to do this on the podcast, and I can't believe all the things she's going to think to say about this. But
instead, we had to do it on air.
But we had to do a clean manure story.
Well, remember, kids, crime stinks.
Okay, that was awful.
Was that bad?
Yeah, that was really bad.
Well, you know what's not bad?
Tell me.
You ready for a great segue? I'm going to use a great segue now. It's going to be so smooth.
Okay, it doesn't work if you preview a segue. It only works if you say it after the segue,
like
to
what a slick
point
segue
attention to it.
Well, the bad news is I already forgot what the segue was because we've been talking about it for so long. All right. A gentleman by the name of Adam Veens. He comes from Connecticut, and he has a hobby. He likes to impersonate police officers.
Huh.
So
We've done a story about that before.
Yeah, we've definitely done a story, but this is kind of a different kind of thing. It makes even less sense. So basically, he happened to be walking around Danielson Superior Court. The town of Danielson is where he's from. I don't know why he was walking around. I assume probably related to some charges he was fighting in court. When he bumps into a fella named Barnes. When he talks to Barnes, he says that he's got a friend, and that his friend's name is Lieutenant John Aiello, and that Lieutenant John Aiello is commander of Troop D and Danielson, a high-up friend. So Barnes goes, oh, cool, and Barnes says, well, I got this DWI problem, and Veens, just meeting Barnes for the first time, goes, I'll see what I can do.
Oh, my Lord. Do you know how many times I've used the line, I'll see what I can do? Not to get somebody out of a court case. Well, maybe once or twice. But that's not.
Oh, Janet. Before we get into your corrupt lifestyle. So then Veens gives Barnes the cell number. And he says, this is the cell number of Aiello. So go ahead and call Aiello, John Aiello, the commander of Troop D. And he'll hook you up, and we'll see if we can't squash this little DWI. You weren't even that drunk, man. So they go ahead and try to do Barnes. That's solid. The problem is that Veens also, at some point when they're meeting up to discuss the DWI case, I think Veens is just like a lonely guy because they meet up several times to discuss this thing. And apparently Veens also gives him his number, which turns out to be the same number as Aiello. So he's texting as both Aiello and Veens. That is when Barnes started to suspect something.
Oh, yeah, that was when. It wasn't when the guy was out of random guy offers to try and get yeah.
Yeah. And so apparently...
I thought they were smarter than that in Connecticut.
Well, I did too. The title of this whole piece is Thompson Man Offered to Fix DUI for Beers and Shrimp Cocktail. And the reason that's the case is because Veens went down to Louisiana at some point, lost his wallet, and called Barnes and said, "You remember how I'm doing you that solid? Can you help me out and give me your credit card information so I can pay for a couple of beers and a shrimp cocktail while I'm down here?"
Really?
He really did that.
He was lonely because.
But that's the thing. He never asked for any other money except for like that one meal. And the quote from Veens after police caught him for impersonating a police officer was, "I don't know what my intentions were going to be other than just helping Barnes out." He's not an actual officer. How is he going to help Barnes out? Is he just going to make Barnes feel better? You're not a cop. I don't know
So
what my
this all
intentions...
stemmed from a DUI. Maybe this guy was drunk when he met the guy, and
Oh no, it's much worse than that. Because so he basically says, "I don't know what my intentions were other than helping Barnes out somehow. I never asked for money, never planned on extorting him for money," and then he apologized for his actions. But when they actually dig into Veens' past, it turns out that over the course of 13 years, he's got several crimes, and that he's impersonated officers before. At one point, when he was being charged in a case, he told responding troopers he was good friends with the duty supervisor and that he would be released from police custody.
duty.
Yeah, I did.
That's
Speaking of manure.
That's a standing thing here at the station.
Yeah. And on May 21st, Veens told troopers responding to an assault investigation he was just lingering at the crime scene of an assault investigation, that he was a retired state trooper. So this guy's got problems, man. This is like a M. Night Shyamalan movie here. I mean, this guy just has a problem. But I thought that was an interesting story, and the title just grabs you.
Yeah.
Beers and shrimp cocktail to
It kind
fix a
of does.
DUI.
Well, I like the publication that you got it from, The Bulletin, in Old English
Bulletin.
writing. That's always kind of swanky.
Yeah, the article said the Bulletin, and it said Danielson, but it didn't say the state, so I had to do some research for this one. Just for you guys. But we're about out of time here. That's our dumb news. We're going to come up with another name for that, I swear. And to come up for another name for dumb news, because dumb news is dumb, we want you guys to help out. Janet, how can they text, direct, and connect with us?
You can send us a text, and you can text us that you like the show, you didn't like the show, you want to hear more about news, you want to hear more about opinions. Tell us what you want to hear, 635-4121. You can reach out to us via email if you have a news story, if you want a different perspective on a story that maybe we didn't get to in this episode, and you want us to cover it maybe next week. news@royalbroadcasting.net is Dylan's email address. You can email me, Janet, at theriver953.com. You can go to our website, fill out the form. You can send us a tweet. You can post something on our Facebook page. You can...
All sorts of things.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So that's about all the time we have. But if you missed any part of this, if you're listening on air, go ahead and go on theriver953.com and check out our Another Look podcast on the podcast page there.
It's a banner right on the front page. You can just click that.
Oh, it's too easy. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. And we'll be back next week with some more Another Look.